The story of the haunted hotel doesn't begin when the first guest steps foot inside its lobby. It begins long before the hotel's grand opening, long before the elegant chandeliers and velvet curtains were hung, before the bustling lobby with its polished floors became filled with guests and staff. The origins of this sinister place are entwined with a curse that began decades earlier. In the late 1800s, the land where the hotel now stands was home to a sprawling asylum known as the Blackthorn Asylum. It was not just a place for the mentally ill, it was a place of horrors where patients were subjected to cruel, inhumane treatments in the name of science. They were isolated, stripped of their dignity, and subjected to dangerous experiments in an attempt to cure them of their ailments. The asylum's cruel methods included lobotomies, electroshock therapy, and experimental drugs that left many of the patients in a catatonic state, their minds forever broken. But what many don't know is that the asylum was no ordinary institution. Some believe the land itself was cursed long before the asylum even existed. Long before anyone knew it, the ground was steeped in blood, the blood of the original settlers who fought over the land in bloody skirmishes. It was the site of massacres, where both native tribes and settlers perished in the name of greed and land ownership. And with every drop of blood that soaked the earth, the land became more and more saturated with dark energy. Despite the atrocities, the asylum remained open for decades. Those who died there didn't get proper burials. Many of them were left to rot, their bodies unclaimed. It's said that their souls became restless, trapped in limbo, wandering the very ground that had been their prison. As the years passed, the asylum's reputation became more macabre. People whispered that the building itself was alive, that it had a consciousness, a will of its own. And when the asylum was finally shut down in the early 1900s due to mounting pressure from the public, the building was left to decay, its halls left abandoned, and its dark history erased from the records. But the spirits remained. The echoes of the tortured souls who once lived and died in that place clung to the earth. And when the hotel was built, it was as if these souls were waiting, as if the land itself had been waiting for someone to come along and awaken the darkness that slumbered there for so long. The hotel's construction was shrouded in mystery. The wealthy businessman who decided to build it, a man by the name of Edmund Blackthorn, strangely sharing a name with the asylum, was rumored to be familiar with the land's dark history. Whether he had known of the spirits, or whether he had been drawn to the land by a force he couldn't understand, no one knows. But Blackthorn had a plan to harness the power of the spirits and the darkness beneath the land. What he did not expect, however, was that this darkness would consume him too, just as it would consume anyone who dared to enter. The hotel's design was strange, almost alien. The layout was confusing, with labyrinthine hallways and staircases that led to nowhere. Rooms that were never used, spaces that shouldn't have existed, doors that locked by themselves. The building seemed to grow on its own, as if it was evolving. The staff noticed it too. They spoke in hushed voices about how the hotel would shift overnight, how a room would disappear only to reappear in a different part of the hotel. The hotel had become something more than a building. It was now a trap, a prison for the living and the dead. But it wasn't just the physical architecture that held the curse. It was the very foundation of the hotel, built atop the graves of the forgotten, the tormented souls who had suffered. And once Blackthorn completed it, it became clear. The hotel was not a luxury retreat. It was a haven for dark forces, a gateway between worlds. It was alive, and it was waiting. As the years passed, the hotel's reputation began to spread. It was said to be the most luxurious place to stay, boasting a full-service spa, fine dining, and world-class amenities. But there were whispers that the hotel was different. There was something about it that unnerved those who stayed for too long. Some guests would leave in the middle of the night without explanation, disappearing as mysteriously as they arrived. Others would check in, only to never be seen again. But for every guest who disappeared, there were more who came. They came seeking peace, relaxation, or just an escape from their daily lives. What they didn't realize, however, was that by stepping foot inside this cursed place, they were becoming part of its dark history. One of the first victims was a young woman named Evelyn. She arrived at the hotel on a warm summer's day, excited for her honeymoon. She and her husband, Richard, had just been married and couldn't wait to start their life together. They were both taken by the beauty of the hotel, its elegant lobby, the crystal chandeliers, and the soft, muted colors of the furniture that made the space feel like a dream. But as they checked in, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, an unseen presence lurking in the shadows. On their second night, things took a turn for the worse. Evelyn woke to find Richard missing. His side of the bed was cold, and when she called out for him, there was no response. She searched the room, but he was nowhere to be found. The panic set in when she went to the hallway and saw that the hotel was eerily quiet. No one was around, no staff, no other guests. It felt as though the entire hotel had gone silent, as though time had frozen. And then she heard it, a faint, distant sound, like whispers coming from the walls. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but the whispers grew louder, clearer. They were calling her name. They were saying her husband's name. In a panic, Evelyn ran to the front desk, but the receptionist was gone. In fact, the whole lobby seemed deserted. Desperate, she ran to the front door, only to find that it was locked, the windows barred from the inside. She couldn't leave. She couldn't even call for help. The phones were dead, the radio silent. Days passed. Hours melted into weeks, but Evelyn could never be sure. The walls began to close in around her. She stopped feeling hungry, stopped feeling tired. She could feel herself changing, her mind growing numb, her body growing weak, as if she too had become part of the hotel. And then, she heard it. Richard's voice, faint, calling out to her from somewhere deep within the hotel. She followed the sound, drawn like a moth to a flame. But as she walked through the twisting hallways, she realized with horror that she had no idea where she was. She had passed the same hallway 4 times. The hotel was shifting, changing. The walls were closing in. Eventually, Evelyn disappeared, just as so many before her had. But her presence was still felt in the hotel. Guests who arrived after her began hearing her whispers. The walls seemed to echo with her voice, desperate and pleading for help. Evelyn was now one of the many trapped souls, a part of the hotel's endless cycle. She had become one of the lost guests who wandered the halls, forever searching for a way out. The spirits who roam the hotel are not mere echoes of the past. They are real, tormented souls who were once guests, just like the ones who stay today. These spirits are not at rest. They are trapped, just as much a part of the hotel as the furniture or the walls. They are the ghosts of those who never checked out, and their stories are far from ordinary. Sarah, for example, checked into the hotel with her husband on their honeymoon. Like Richard and Evelyn, they were captivated by the beauty and grandeur of the hotel. But just like so many others before her, Sarah began to notice that something was not right. At first, it was small things. Her husband Tom seemed distant, his mood changing for no reason. He would disappear for hours, leaving her alone in the room, his absence unsettling. One night, Sarah woke up to find Tom standing at the foot of the bed, staring at her with blank, unblinking eyes. He didn't speak. He didn't move. And no matter how many times she called his name, he didn't respond. When she reached out to touch him, he was cold, unnaturally cold. But when she looked again, he was gone, vanished without a trace. When she tried to leave the room, she found that the door wouldn't open. It felt as though something was holding it shut. She tried the window, but the glass was sealed tight. It was as though the hotel was trapping her inside. And when she looked down the hall, she saw him again. Tom, but now he was different. His eyes were hollow, his face gaunt, as though he hadn't eaten in days. And behind him, a dark shadow moved. The next morning, Tom was found dead in the room across the hall, his body pale and lifeless. But Sarah was not allowed to leave. Every time she tried, she was pulled back, her every attempt thwarted by the hotel. And as days turned into weeks, Sarah too began to lose herself. She stopped feeling hungry, stopped feeling tired. The hotel had taken her, and it was slowly draining her life force. She is not alone. The hotel is filled with the spirits of those who came before her. They roam the halls, unable to escape, their souls trapped in an eternal loop of torment. Some are desperate to be heard. Some are resigned to their fate. But all are bound to the hotel, forever. The most unsettling part is that some of these spirits aren't even aware they're dead. They wander the halls, searching for answers, unable to understand why they can't leave. They are just as much prisoners as the living guests who check in. And as the years go by, they grow more desperate, more twisted. As we move deeper into the mysteries of the hotel, there's a key figure whose role in all of this cannot be overlooked: the architect who designed this nightmarish place. The architect's journals, which were unearthed years after his mysterious disappearance, reveal a terrifying truth about the hotel's construction. Edmund Blackthorn, the man who envisioned this hotel, was not just a wealthy businessman with an interest in luxury real estate. He was a member of a secret society, one that practiced ancient and forbidden rituals. The group had been searching for a way to harness the energy of the spiritual world, seeking to bind the souls of the dead to objects of power. And Blackthorn's ambition had led him to this cursed land, a place soaked in the suffering of the asylum's patients and the blood of the land's original settlers. The design of the hotel was no accident. Each room, each hallway, each staircase was meticulously planned to align with the rituals of the occult society to which Blackthorn belonged. The hotel was built like a maze, its architecture intentionally chaotic. There were hidden rooms, locked doors that led nowhere, and staircases that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The architect had designed the hotel to be a spiritual conduit, a vessel for trapping souls and using their energy for his own dark purposes. As Blackthorn's journals reveal, he believed that by harnessing the spirits of the asylum's past, he could create a place of unimaginable power, a hotel that would not only trap souls, but also grant him eternal life. The land beneath the hotel, cursed by the restless spirits, was the perfect foundation for this experiment. Blackthorn's plan was simple: create a place where souls could be funneled, stored, and used to fuel his ambitions. But there was a fatal flaw in his design. He did not realize that the hotel itself would become alive. The power of the spirits, the cursed land, and his own greed combined to create something far more dangerous than he could have imagined. As construction on the hotel progressed, strange things began to happen. Workers reported hearing disembodied voices, footsteps echoing through empty rooms, and feeling the unnerving sensation of being watched. Some workers even went missing. It was as if the hotel was calling to them, pulling them in, claiming them as part of its ever-growing collection of trapped souls. What Blackthorn didn't realize, or perhaps chose to ignore, was that the hotel was no longer just a building. It had become something more, something alive, a dark entity that fed on the souls of the living and the tortured spirits that lingered in the asylum's wake. It began to grow in power, bending the laws of reality itself. The hallways shifted, rooms appeared and disappeared, and time itself seemed to stretch, trapping those who wandered too far in its endless corridors. As Blackthorn's journals detailed, he became obsessed with his project, working tirelessly to finish it. But in his obsession, he made a critical error. He sealed himself inside the very hotel he had created. He believed that by doing so, he could bind his soul to the hotel itself, granting him eternal life. But the hotel, hungry for more power, devoured him whole. The architect's spirit is now bound to the hotel, trapped within its walls. Some say he wanders the halls, seeking new victims to claim, while others believe he is part of the hotel, his consciousness absorbed into the very structure of the building. No matter what the truth is, one thing is clear: Blackthorn's ambition, his greed, and his dark rituals have turned the hotel into a prison for the living and the dead alike. And now we come to the final question. What happens when you've been trapped by the hotel for too long? When the spirits have drained your fear, when your soul has been twisted and altered by the building, what becomes of you? The answer is chilling. Guests who enter the hotel and remain for too long lose themselves. The hotel doesn't just trap their bodies, it traps their minds, their spirits. Over time, the spirits of the hotel begin to consume the living. They sap away the energy of the guests, feeding off their fear, their despair, their very life force. The hotel, once a place of luxury and elegance, becomes a prison that slowly wears down its inhabitants until they are no longer human. They are part of the hotel itself. The longer you stay, the more you become a part of the hotel's dark cycle. You begin to forget who you are. Your memories fade. You no longer feel hunger, thirst, or pain in the same way. You stop questioning why the hotel feels like a maze, why it shifts around you, why the same hallways seem to repeat over and over again. Your perception of time begins to warp. A day could feel like a year. A week could pass in the blink of an eye. You are no longer sure if you've been there for days, months, or years. The hotel has stolen your sense of reality. It is said that those who have been trapped for too long start to resemble the ghosts who wander the halls. Their eyes become hollow, their skin pale and translucent. They lose their voice. Their movements become slow and jerky. They are neither alive nor dead. They exist in a state between the two, trapped in a purgatory of the hotel's making. And then, something terrifying happens. They stop being guests. They stop being people. They become part of the hotel, bound to its walls, its halls, its rooms. They become the hotel's eternal occupants, wandering the halls in an endless cycle. They become the ghosts that future guests will encounter, souls forever trapped in the maze, forever lost, forever wandering, hoping for release that will never come. The worst part is that, over time, the hotel becomes more aware of your presence. It begins to play with you, toying with your sanity. It will show you glimpses of the outside world, of freedom, only to pull it away at the last moment. It will show you loved ones, your family, friends, only to have them turn into nightmarish versions of themselves. It will trick you, feed on your emotions, and break you. And when you finally break, when you've given up all hope, the hotel will take you completely. You will become just another lost soul, wandering its endless halls, just like the countless others who came before you. For those brave, or foolish, enough to attempt an escape, you will find that the hotel has no mercy. Every door you open leads you back to where you started. Every hallway loops back on itself. The windows are always locked. The doors are always sealed. There is no way out. Some say that the spirits of the hotel have become aware of this truth. They no longer try to leave. They have given up, resigned to their fate. They wander the halls, searching for new souls to trap, feeding off the terror of the living. But for some of the spirits, there is a glimmer of hope, something that keeps them going. They still try to warn the guests. They still try to help the living avoid the fate they've suffered. They leave clues, hidden messages in the walls, in the floorboards, in the shadows. They reach out in whispers, in dreams, in the night. But the hotel is clever. It's always watching. It knows how to hide the truth. It knows how to twist the warnings and turn them into madness. The hotel has become a prison for both the living and the dead, and the cycle continues eternally. So, as I leave you with this warning, I urge you to think twice before stepping foot inside that cursed hotel. It may seem like a beautiful place at first, a peaceful retreat from the chaos of the world, but it is far from that. It is a prison, a place that traps the soul, where time loses all meaning, and where fear is the only thing that grows. If you ever find yourself standing before its grand doors, looking at the majestic architecture, hearing the soft murmur of the lobby, remember this: you are not just walking into a hotel, you are stepping into a trap. Once you check in, you may never check out. I warn you, stay away. Or you might find yourself becoming one of the lost souls, wandering the halls for eternity with no hope of escape. For now, turn away before it's too late. There is still time to avoid the nightmare that waits for you. But be warned, once you hear the whispers, once you step inside, the hotel will never let you go.